Finally. Someone worthy of carrying my grandchildren. And maybe this batch will turn out better too. Raised better. You know, I always told Sarah to lay off the Tylenol when she was pregnant, but what do I know? That was my mother-in-law's toast at my brother-in-law's engagement party. And yes, my children are autistic, so am I. The crowd just sat there, frozen. Forks paused halfway to mouths. Eyes dropped to napkins. Someone coughed. I also have ADHD. I live in a world where I work twice as hard to look like I'm not working hard at all. Where extra noise and extra expectations stack on my nervous system like bricks. And my mother-in-law had just stood in front of our entire family and said, into a microphone, that my children were a failed batch. That I was the reason. That I should have known better. That she'd warned me. It was cruel. It was calculated. And it was dressed up as a joke so she could pretend it was harmless. I remember looking at my husband. I remember staring at his eyes like I was trying to tether him to me. Like if he saw me properly, he'd stand up and say something. He didn't. He stared at the table. He blinked too fast. He took a sip of beer. He did what he always did. Nothing. And in that moment I knew something that changed everything. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a system. And I was done living inside it. Before I go any further, I want to say this. If you've ever been the person everyone expects to absorb the cruelty because you're the calm one, please hit like and subscribe. It helps more than you think. And it tells the algorithm to show this story to people who need it. Because what happened next didn't start at that engagement party. That engagement party was just the first time she said it out loud. I'm 42 years old. I work remotely as a data engineer. I build pipelines and dashboards and automated systems that take messy, chaotic information and turn it into something clean, something predictable, something reliable. People think that means I'm quiet and emotionless. They think I love numbers more than people. The truth is simpler. I like work that makes sense. I like work where the rules are real. I like work where if something breaks, you can trace it and fix it. My family life never worked like that. I married my husband in my late 20s. He was kind when it mattered, soft, gentle. The type of man who'd make tea without being asked. The type who'd rub your shoulders while you stared at your laptop and supported you when the world felt like it was too much. But he was also the type of man who turned to mist the moment conflict showed up. And because his father wasn't around, his mother became everything. She wasn't just his parent. She was his authority, his compass, his entire idea of what a good son looked like. And she had a very specific idea of what a good daughter-in-law looked like too. A good daughter-in-law was grateful, quiet, flexible, smiling. A good daughter-in-law didn't need things explained. A good daughter-in-law didn't take things so literally. A good daughter-in-law didn't need to leave early. Or sit in the car for 10 minutes after a family dinner to recover. Or wear earplugs at a birthday party because the noise felt like needles. A good daughter-in-law didn't say, that hurts. Because in her world, if something hurt you, that meant you were weak. And weakness was something she despised. When I got pregnant with our first child, she was thrilled. Not for me. For herself. She kept saying, my baby is having a baby. She'd touch my stomach without asking, like I was a display case. When our son was born, he was beautiful. Bright eyes, serious face. He didn't like loud sounds. He didn't like being passed around. He liked routine. He liked quiet. He liked the same blanket and the same corner of the sofa. She called him fussy. When he was 2, he'd line up his toy cars with intense focus. He'd melt down if someone moved them. He'd cover his ears in supermarkets. He'd cry if a stranger tried to touch him. I recognized him in myself, in a way that made my throat tighten. She called him spoiled. When our daughter came along, she was a little storm. Sensitive. Sharp. Curious. The kind of child who could be laughing one second and overwhelmed the next. I recognized her too. My mother-in-law called her dramatic. At that stage, we didn't have formal diagnoses. They were young and wait times are high for assessments. But I knew. I knew in my bones. And my mother-in-law knew too. Not because she understood. Because she enjoyed having something to weaponize. It started with little remarks. The kind that sound harmless if you tell them to someone else. The kind that make you look unreasonable if you complain. At a family dinner, my son would be overwhelmed and I'd take him to the hallway to calm down. She'd say loudly, he needs to learn the world does not stop for him. At Christmas, my daughter would refuse a scratchy dress. She'd say, in my day, children didn't run the house. At a birthday party, I'd politely ask if we could turn the music down. She'd laugh and say, oh Sarah, always trying to control the environment. That was one of her favorite phrases. Control the environment. As if wanting your child to not cry in pain was some sort of power trip. I'd look at my husband. Every time. Because I kept expecting him to do the simplest thing a husband can do. Stand with his wife. He'd give me that tight smile. The one that said, please don't. He'd murmur, let it go. And if I asked him later why he didn't say anything, he'd do what he always did. He'd minimize. That is just how she is. She means well. You take things too personally. And that one hit me like a slap every time. Because autistic people are told that constantly. You take things too personally. You misunderstand tone. You miss jokes. You're too literal. You're too sensitive. She knew that. She knew exactly how to frame her cruelty, so that if I reacted, it'd look like proof that I was the problem. For years, I tried to stay ahead of it. I tried to be the reasonable one. I tried to be the bigger person. I didn't want to be the wife everyone whispered about. The one who could not handle the family. I wanted my children to have cousins and uncles and birthday parties and memories that didn't involve me pulling them out of a room because their nervous systems had short-circuited, so I tried. I masked. I smiled. I showed up. And she kept digging. One afternoon, when my son was about 4, we were at her house. She had the TV blaring, the kettle whistling, the radio on in the kitchen, her friend talking loudly. My son was rocking slightly, hands on his ears. I said gently, can we turn one thing off? She looked at me with a fake kind face. Oh, sweetheart, she said. You always think the world should adapt to you. Then she leaned closer and lowered her voice. You know, she said, maybe if you didn't fill their heads with your anxiety, they'd cope better. I froze. I looked at my husband. He was standing by the fridge, staring at the magnets like they were fascinating. I said, did you hear that? He rubbed his face and sighed. Please, he said. Not today. Not today. That's what he said every time. And one day, I realized there was never going to be a today when he chose me. Because choosing me would mean choosing against her. And he didn't have that in him. My mother-in-law didn't just gaslight me. She refined it. She started using concern as a weapon. She'd say things like, we just worry about you, Sarah. That word mattered. We implies a committee, a consensus, an agreed reality. And she'd look at my husband when she said it as if she was inviting him to join her side of the table. He always did. If my son melted down at a family gathering, she'd sigh dramatically and say, we worry about how much you have to cope with. If I forgot to reply to a message because I was overloaded, she'd say, we worry you're spiraling. If I asked her not to post pictures of my kids having a meltdown on Facebook, she'd laugh and say, we worry that you see everything as an attack. It made me feel like I was losing my footing in my own life. It was working. Because the truth was, I was coping. I was working. I was parenting. I was holding everything together. But she kept talking like I was on the edge of collapse, like I was unreliable, like she was the stable one. And my husband kept letting her. Eventually she started calling my husband more. Every day. Sometimes multiple times a day. He'd step outside to take the call. He'd come back in with that same tight expression, like he'd just been scolded. And if I asked what she wanted, he'd say, nothing. Always nothing. But nothing changed the way he moved in the house. Nothing didn't make him tense and quiet. Nothing didn't make him short with the kids. Nothing was not nothing. It was just something he was hiding from me. The first time I pushed back properly was at a family barbecue. My son was overwhelmed. The smell of smoke, the noise, the unpredictable movement of people around him. I told my husband I was taking him inside for a quiet break. My mother-in-law stood in the doorway and said, loudly of course, the special treatment, again. I felt the heat rush up my neck, my ears felt red hot and my chest tightened. I looked at my husband. He was holding a plate of burgers and staring at the ground. Something in me snapped, just a little. I smiled. Polite. It isn't special treatment. It is parenting. She narrowed her eyes. She said, you always think you know better than everyone else. I nodded once. Sometimes, I do. A couple of people laughed. Not at me. With me. Quietly. Relieved, almost. My mother-in-law's mouth tightened. Later, my husband hissed at me in the kitchen. You embarrassed her, I stared at him. She embarrassed me and our child, and you just watched. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. He didn't argue. He never argued with facts. He just made a face like he was tired of me. That was the beginning of the end. I didn't know it yet. But it was. Because once you stop being afraid of being seen as difficult, you become dangerous to people like her. After that, the digs got sharper. She started targeting my work because she hated that I was the breadwinner. It must be nice to hide at home all day and play on the computer. I snapped back, it must be exhausting to call that hiding when I pay for half your son's life. She'd blink, offended, and then laugh like I was joking. "I'm only teasing, dear," she'd say. And I'd reply, "So am I, Mom." Then she started targeting my ADHD. If I forgot something, she'd sigh and say, "Oh, Sarah." Always scattered. If I got overwhelmed at a crowded dinner, she'd say, "Here we go." If I asked her not to change the plan last minute, she'd roll her eyes. "You and your rules," she'd say. I'd smile. "I like rules," I'd say. "They keep people accountable." That one made her quiet. Just for a second. And I remember looking at my husband again, waiting for him to notice that his mother was trying to push me into a corner, and I was now pushing back. He looked at his phone. Of course he did. Then came the engagement party. My husband's younger brother Ben had proposed to his girlfriend. Everyone loved her. She was bubbly and social and the kind of person who never seemed uncomfortable in a room. My mother-in-law adored her instantly. Not because she was kind. Because she was easy. The engagement party was at a local venue. Upper working class fancy. A buffet. A DJ. Balloons. A photo wall. Everyone dressed like they wanted to look like they had made it. My mother-in-law floated around like the owner of the place. She kept taking pictures. She kept grabbing people for hugs. She kept saying, "This family deserves happiness." Every time she said "this family," she said it like I was a guest. My husband stayed close to her. Not to me. I watched him. I watched him drift toward her like a moth. I told myself not to read into it. Then she took the mic. You already know what she said. "Finally someone worthy of carrying my grandchildren. Maybe this batch will turn out better. Lay off the Tylenol." I remember the silence. I remember everyone's eyes widening. I remember my husband's face. Not angry. Not protective. Panicked. Like he was watching a car crash and praying nobody blamed him. My body felt strange. Like my emotions were delayed. Like my brain was buffering. That happens to me sometimes. It isn't that I don't feel. It is that I feel it all at once later. In the moment, I did what I have always done. I stayed still. I stayed polite. I clapped once, softly, because that's what you do when you don't want to give someone the satisfaction of seeing you break. My mother-in-law stepped down from the mic with that smug little smile that said, "She got away with it." My husband leaned in and whispered, "Please, don't cause a scene." That was his only instinct. Not, "Are you okay?" Not, "That was wrong." Just, "Don't embarrass us." I turned my head slowly and looked at him. I said very quietly, "Did you hear what she just implied about our children?" He swallowed. "She was joking," he said. I nodded. "So was I said. "When I married you, you spineless leech." His eyes flashed. Hurt. Offended. For a second, I thought he might actually stand up for himself. He didn't. He just walked away. That night, after we got home, my son was asleep with his favorite blanket. My daughter was asleep with her lamp on because she hates the dark. The house was quiet. The kind of quiet I crave. My husband sat on the sofa, scrolling. I sat opposite him and said, "I need you to understand something." He sighed like I was a chore. I said, "Your mother publicly blamed me for our children being autistic. That isn't a joke. That isn't funny. And it isn't true." He looked up. Finally. "I don't want to talk about it," he said. I stared at him. "That is exactly what she counts on." He rubbed his temples. "She just worries," he said. "She says you get overwhelmed." My throat went cold. "She says this, she says that." I repeated. He blinked. And in that moment I realized he was not just silent. He was reporting to her. Weeks passed. The engagement party became one of those things people didn't mention directly. They spoke around it. They avoided it. My mother-in-law acted like nothing happened. She texted me the next day. "Hope you're not upset. You know I love the kids. I was only teasing. Only teasing." My husband told me I should reply politely. I didn't reply at all. Then came the day everything snapped into place. My son had a sports day at school. Nothing major. A little running. A little football. He likes movement when he feels safe. He likes the rules. That morning, I packed his lunch. I checked his sensory kit. I reminded him who would pick him up. "Me," I said. "Always me." He nodded. He trusts routines. He trusts me. I went back to work. I had meetings. I had code to review. I was in my zone. The part of my brain that feels like clean lines and logic. My phone was silent. No calls. No messages. Then, around mid-afternoon, I got an email notification from the school. Just a generic message. "Your child had a minor injury during sports. He has been collected early." Collected early. I frowned. Because I had not collected him. I called the school immediately. The admin woman answered like it was a normal day. "Yes," she said. "He's fine. Just a little sprain. His grandmother picked him up." I froze. My mother-in-law, I said slowly. Yes, the older woman said. She is listed as primary contact. Primary contact. I felt my heart start to thud in my ears. I am his mother, I said. Yes, she said, still polite, still calm. But the forms were updated. Your husband signed them. He authorized his mother as primary guardian contact and pickup. My stomach dropped. I drove to the school anyway. I needed to see it. I needed to anchor it in reality because my brain, under stress, likes to float. At the front desk, I asked them to show me. The admin printed out the contact sheet. There it was. My name. Second, my mother-in-law's name. First, primary. Emergency pickup authorized. Decision maker. I stared at the paper like it was written in a foreign language. I said, why was I not called? The admin glanced at the paper again. It says, she replied, your husband requested that his mother be contacted first, due to concerns about your capacity during stressful incidents. Concerns about your capacity. I felt my face go numb. I drove home in a fog. When I got there, my husband was in the kitchen. Normal. Like nothing had happened. I stood in the doorway and said, where is our son? He looked up, startled. At Mum's, he said. He's fine. I walked closer. Why is your mother listed as our son's primary guardian contact at school? His face changed. Not confusion. Not shock. Guilt. He swallowed. Mum was worried, he said. I stared at him. She was worried, I repeated. He avoided my eyes and fiddled with a mug. She said you get overwhelmed, he said. She said it might be safer if she was contacted first. Safer? I felt something in me turn cold and sharp. And you agreed, I said. He shrugged, like it was paperwork, like it was nothing. It's just admin, he said. It doesn't mean anything. My voice came out flat. It means everything, I said. It means you signed a document that tells the world I'm not fit to care for my own child. He finally looked at me. You're making it sound worse than it is, he said, that phrase. Making it sound worse than it is. Gaslighting isn't always loud. Sometimes it is a soft sentence that makes you feel insane. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I did what I always do when something does not make sense. I went looking for the data. While he sat there, I walked upstairs, opened my laptop, and logged into his email. I knew his password. Not because I spy. Because I've been the one keeping his life organized for years. And there it was. An email trail between him and his mother. Subject line. Guardianship. I opened it. His mother had written. I am very concerned. Sarah is easily overwhelmed. She takes things personally. She does not handle emergencies well. I think I should be the primary contact, at least until she gets help. Then my husband replied. You're right. I will update it. It is better this way. I don't want the kids affected by her moods. Her response was immediate. Good boy. I knew you would do the right thing. Good boy. I sat very still. My hands started shaking. Not from anger. From clarity. This was not my mother-in-law going behind my back alone. This was my husband choosing her. In writing. If you're still with me right now, I want you to leave a comment. Tell me where you're watching from. Or tell me if you have ever had someone smile in your face and quietly undermine you behind the scenes. Because I know I'm not the only one who has lived inside that kind of betrayal. I closed the laptop. I walked back downstairs. My husband looked at me like I was about to explode. I didn't. I said, calmly, you told the school your mother should be contacted first, because of concerns about my capacity. He blinked. I didn't say it like that, he said. I nodded. You did, I said. I read it. His face strained. For a second, he looked like a child caught stealing. Then his spine collapsed again. She pressured me, he said. I tilted my head. She pressured you, I repeated. And you folded, like you always do. He tried to reach for my hand. I stepped back. I said, bring our son home. He hesitated. Listen to me. Bring him home. He moved then. Because that tone is the one he responds to. Not emotion. Not hurt. Instruction. When he left, I sat at the kitchen table and stared at the wall. This is the part where some people would rush to their mother-in-law's house and scream. That isn't me. When I get overwhelmed, my body shuts down. My brain goes cold. I go quiet. And then, once I have processed, I act. That night, my mother-in-law called me. I answered. Because I wanted to hear her voice. I wanted to hear how she framed it. Oh, Sarah, she said, bright and sugary. How is my grandson? My grandson. Not your son. I said, why are you listed as a primary contact at his school? She laughed softly. Because someone has to be the adult, she said. I felt my jaw tighten. I said I am. I'm his mother. She sighed like I was exhausting. Yes, but you're not always steady, are you? There it was, steady. That was her favorite word now. She went on. I am not criticizing you, I am supporting you. You should be grateful someone cares enough to step in. I took a breath. I said, you didn't step in. You stepped over. She scoffed. Oh please, she said. Don't start with your little word games. Little word games. Because that's how people like her respond when you use precise language. They mock it. I said, you did this behind my back. She lowered her voice. I did this to protect my grandchildren, and frankly, Sarah, if you cannot cope with that reality, that is not my problem. I paused. I let the silence stretch. Then I said calmly, you keep calling them your grandchildren like they are your property. They are my children, and you don't get to demote me. She laughed again. Cruel this time. Demote you, she repeated. Oh, Sarah, you're so dramatic. I didn't raise my voice. I said I'm not dramatic. I'm accurate. She went quiet. Then she snapped, you always think you're the smartest person in the room. I smiled, even though she could not see it. I'm not always the smartest, but I'm always the one paying attention, watching every move. She hung up. When my husband came back with our son, he tried to apologize. Not properly. Not like a man who understands what he did. Like someone trying to smooth the situation so he does not have to feel uncomfortable. I was trying to help, he said. I stared at him. No, you were trying to keep your mother happy. He swallowed. She worries. I looked at him for a long moment. Then I said, you don't have a wife, you have a handler. And it isn't me. His eyes watered. He needed to feel something. From that point on, my mother-in-law stopped pretending. The mask slipped more often. At a family dinner, she said loudly, I picked up the children's school stuff last week. Sarah would have forgotten. I replied calmly, you wouldn't have had access if your limp-willed son hadn't given it to you. The table went quiet. My husband stared at his plate. My mother-in-law smiled angrily. Oh, she said, are we being sensitive again? I tilted my head. No, we are being specific. At another gathering, she said, Ben's fiancée will make such a good mother. She is normal. Normal. She said it like a weapon. I looked at her and said, softly, normal is not a virtue. It is just average. People chuckled. My mother-in-law's eyes narrowed. She said, there you go again. Always correcting. I nodded. Yes, Mom, because you're often wrong. My husband pulled me aside afterward. You're making things worse, he whispered. I stared at him. Worse for who? He didn't answer. Because he knew the answer. Worse for him. Worse for his comfort. Worse for his mother's sense of power. Not worse for me. Not worse for our children. Just worse for the fragile little system he lived inside. Weeks turned into months. Ben and his fiancée planned their wedding. My mother-in-law became more obsessed than ever. Because without a husband, her sons were her entire identity. Weddings are social currency for women like her. They get to perform motherhood and martyrdom at the same time. She inserted herself into everything. She'd call my husband about suits, about seating, about speeches. He'd take the calls in the hallway like a teenager hiding something. And I started to notice something else. When I asked my husband a question, he'd pause, then glance at his phone, like he needed approval. He was not a husband. He was a satellite, orbiting her. Then he lost his job. It happened quietly. Cuts. Restructuring. The kind of corporate culling that does not care if you have kids. He came home with a box and that stunned look men get when their identity takes a hit. I should have felt sympathy. And I did. For a whole 10 seconds. And then I remembered the email. I remembered him calling my neurodivergence moods. I remembered him signing away my role. So I did what I always do. I handled it. I increased my workload and picked up some consulting work. I kept the household stable. I paid the bills. I made sure the kids didn't feel the ripple. My mother-in-law acted like it was my responsibility anyway. She said things like, well, at least you have your little computer job. Little. Always little. I looked at her and said, it isn't little. It is the reason your son still has a roof over his head. The room went quiet again. And every time the room went quiet, I could feel something shifting. People were seeing it. People were realizing I was not the unstable one. I was the only stable one in the whole arrangement. My mother-in-law didn't like that. So she went for the jugular again. At a pre-wedding family gathering, she leaned in close to Ben's fiancée and said, loud enough for me to hear, the key isn't to let your children run you. If they are too sensitive, you must toughen them up. Then she glanced at me. Isn't that right, Sarah? It was a trap. If I reacted, I would look defensive. If I stayed quiet, I would look dominant. I smiled politely. I said, actually, the key is to understand your child. Not break them to fit your mold. She rolled her eyes. Oh, honestly, she said. You and your labels. I kept my voice even. They're not labels, I said. They're explanations. Labels are what you give to people when you want to dismiss them. My mother-in-law's face tightened. And my husband sat there, silent as usual, like he was furniture. I looked at him. I held his gaze. I said calmly, are you going to let her talk about our children like that? He blinked. He looked at his mother. And he said nothing. That was the last time I asked him to choose. Because I already knew the answer. A few days later, my mother-in-law texted my husband. I knew because I saw it pop up on his phone while he was in the shower. Sarah is escalating again. She is unstable. You need to manage her. You cannot have her ruining Ben's wedding. Manager her? I stared at those words until my eyes blurred. Then I put the phone down. I didn't confront him. Not yet. Because here's the truth. When you have spent your whole life being told you're too much, you learn to hold back. You learn to question yourself. You learn to wait until you're 100% sure before you drop the axe. That is one of the quiet tortures of being neurodivergent in a world that does not understand you. You don't get to trust your first instinct. Because everyone has spent years telling you your instincts are wrong. But once you see the pattern clearly, once you know you're not imagining it, you become terrifying. Because you stop arguing. And you start executing. I started planning the way I plan my work. Quietly. Logically. Methodically. I documented everything. Not for drama. For clarity. The engagement party speech. The school forms. The email trail. The texts. The minimizing. I spoke to my parents. They live out of state. They have always been my safe place. They are not perfect, but they have never made me feel like my brain was a problem. My mother cried when I told her what the engagement party speech had been. My father went quiet. Then he said, come home. I found a rental near them. A simple place. Good schools. Quiet area. I kept my job. Remote work makes that easy. The company does not care where your laptop sits, as long as you deliver. I lined up support for the kids. I scheduled transitions in a way that wouldn't shock their routines. I didn't tell my husband. Because he'd already shown me what he does with information. He takes it to his mother. And I wasn't going to give her time to try to block me. The wedding date got closer. Ben was excited. His fiancée was glowing. My mother-in-law was vibrating with control. She kept saying, this is my moment. Not his. Not theirs. Hers. And then, like clockwork, she decided she wanted one more public performance. At the engagement party, she'd taken a shot at me and got away with it. So she wanted to do it again. Bigger. Meaner. More humiliating. She didn't get the chance, because I didn't give her another stage. I waited. I waited through the rehearsals. The fittings. The family dinners. I waited through my husband's sulking and his job loss and his silent resentment. I waited through my mother-in-law's smug little smiles. And then, on the morning of the wedding, I did something that was long coming but they never expected me to do. I left. No fight. No screaming. No emotional scene for them to twist into proof that I was unstable. Just absence. I left the state with our children. Our bags were packed the night before. The kids were told we were going on a trip to see Grandma and Grandpa. They were calm because I made it calm. At dawn, I loaded the car. I checked the seats. I checked the snacks. I checked the sensory items. Routine. Predictability. Safety. Then I drove. While they were all waking up thinking they were about to have their big family day, I was already crossing state lines. And then he received the envelope. The divorce papers were served that morning. Not because I wanted to ruin Ben's wedding. Because I wanted a date they'd never forget. Because I wanted my mother-in-law to understand something very clearly. You can take the mic. You can make the room laugh. You can call me unstable. You can control your son. But you don't get to make a mockery of my children and take my life at the same time. According to my sister-in-law, this is what happened. She dropped my mother-in-law off at our house early. Dressed. Hair done. Makeup perfect. The mother of the groom performance ready to go. She was expecting my husband to drive her. She knocked. No answer. She knocked again. Harder. Finally, my husband opened the door. He looked wrecked, like someone had turned off his power. My mother-in-law snapped, "What are you doing? We're late." He didn't speak. He just held out the papers. His hands were shaking. He said in this small broken voice, "She's leaving me." My mother-in-law's face changed instantly. From irritation to disbelief, to rage. "She's what?" He swallowed, staring at the papers like they were a foreign language. "She's leaving," he repeated. She took the kids. My mother-in-law grabbed the papers and scanned them. Her mouth opened, then closed. She can't just take the children, she said, like she was speaking to the universe. My husband made a sound. Half laugh. Half sob. She did, he said. And that is when it hit them. I was the breadwinner. I had the stable job. I worked remotely. I could live anywhere. He had just lost his job. Cuts. Restructuring. No severance worth mentioning. He had no power. And when you're a man who has spent your life being handled by your mother and carried by your wife, you don't suddenly become a competent co-parent on demand. They realized there was nothing they could do. No frantic phone call was going to make me come back. Not after the school forms. Not after the engagement party speech. Not after years of being gaslighted and abused. My mother-in-law started to panic. She can't do this, she kept saying. She can't do this. My husband sat down on the stairs and put his head in his hands. He didn't say, I love her. He didn't say, I miss the kids. He said, what am I supposed to do? And that was the most honest thing he had ever said. Because he had never done anything. He had always been managed. First by his mother. Then by me. And now he had nobody. My mother-in-law's voice rose. This is your fault, she snapped at him. He looked up at her with red eyes. How is it my fault? She pointed at the papers like they were an insult. You let her think she had power. You should have stopped her. Stopped me. That was her thought at that moment. That her coward son could stop me. That I was a thing to be stopped. A risk to be managed. A nuisance. My sister-in-law told me my mother-in-law started shaking. Like her body could not hold the shock. Then she did something I never expected. She started crying. Not soft crying. Not sad crying. An ugly breakdown. Loud. Breathless. Panicked. Because she could feel it. Without me, her son collapses. And if her son collapses, she becomes responsible for him again. Full-time. Emotionally. Financially. In every way that drains a person. She didn't want me gone like this. She wanted me gone and still useful. She wanted me in the background, still paying bills, still organizing, still absorbing, while she got to run the family. But I had removed myself completely. My husband didn't go to the wedding. He couldn't apparently. My mother-in-law went anyway. Because she cares more about appearances than reality. She showed up alone, shaking, trying to smile. The family knew something was wrong. But weddings don't stop for drama. Later that day, I got messages from people who had always quietly liked me. People who never spoke up publicly when she was cruel, but who were not blind. They told me what happened. They said my mother-in-law insisted on giving a speech. They said she took the mic and tried to start with the usual performance. Then she cracked. Her voice broke. Her hands shook. She started rambling. She started saying things like, I have done everything for everyone. She started crying about loyalty. She started saying, some people don't appreciate family. Then, in front of everyone, she said my name like it was a curse. And she fell apart. Not the graceful kind. The kind that makes people look away. They told me Ben's bride looked horrified. They told me people were whispering. They told me someone took the mic away gently and guided her back to her seat. They told me she sat there trembling, mascara running, while the wedding carried on without her control. And I want you to understand something. I didn't feel guilty. I felt quiet. Quiet as peace in an autistic person's world. I felt the kind of calm you only get when the noise finally stops. That night, I was in a rental house near my parents. My kids were asleep. Safe. Quiet. Predictable. My mother brought me a cup of tea and sat beside me. She said, Are you okay? I looked at her and nodded. I think I've been holding my breath for 10 years. And for the first time in a long time, I exhaled. A few days later, my husband tried to call. I didn't answer. He sent texts. Where are the kids? How could you? My mom is devastated. You're ruining everything. Please. Please. Please come back. Then he shifted into anger. This is kidnapping. You're unstable. You always do this with your stupid moods. You're overreacting. You're out of control. My mother-in-law then decided to try to reason with me. She texted me, Sarah, why are you doing this? We love you and the children sincerely and only wanted what's best for everyone. I read the messages and felt nothing. Because that was their script. When I was quiet, I was compliant. When I reacted, I was unstable. I did send one reply, though, to my mother-in-law. I did this to protect my children and frankly, if you cannot cope with that reality, that is not my problem. She didn't bother to reply a gaslighter who doesn't like their own words used on them. Who'd have thought it? There was no version of me in their story that was allowed to be me, to be powerful. So I stopped performing for their story and decided to write my own. And here is what I know now. My mother-in-law didn't destroy my marriage alone. She had a co-conspirator in my husband. He destroyed it every time he looked at his mother instead of at me. He destroyed it every time he let her insult our children and called it a joke. He destroyed it when he signed school forms that made his mother the primary contact because she had concerns about my capacity. He destroyed it in writing. And once I saw it clearly, I didn't need revenge. I just needed to leave. Because the most painful consequence for people who live off control isn't confrontation. It is abandonment. A few weeks after the wedding, I heard through family that my husband had moved in with his mother. Of course he had. He had nowhere else to go. He didn't know how to exist without a woman organizing his life. And apparently my mother-in-law was furious. Not at him. Not at herself. At me. Because now she had what she wanted. Her son back under her roof. And it was a nightmare. He was depressed. He was angry. He was useless. He didn't help. He expected to be mothered. He expected her to do what I had done. And she hated it. She started calling relatives and complaining about how hard it was. She started saying she didn't understand what happened to him. She started saying I'd ruined him. Ruined him. As if he had not chosen this. As if he had not spent years refusing to be a husband and a father in any real way. As if my job was to keep him functional while he betrayed me quietly. I didn't ruin him. I removed myself. And without me, the truth shone brightly. He was not a partner. He was a dependent. And my mother-in-law finally had to hold the weight of what she created. If you have made it this far, I want you to leave another comment. Tell me if you have ever watched someone treat you like you were too much, while they quietly demanded you carry everything. And tell me what finally made you stop. Because this is what I learned. People will push and push and push when they think you will always stay. They will joke. They will undermine. They will rewrite your role in your own life. They will smile while they do it. And they will call you unstable the moment you step out of line. So don't argue with people who are committed to misunderstanding you. Don't beg for respect from people who benefit from your silence. Don't keep offering yourself up to be managed. You don't need permission to leave. My mother-in-law wanted to erase me. Instead, I erased my participation. And when I did, her whole little system collapsed. My name is Sarah, and this is what happened when I was pushed beyond restraint. Please like, share, and subscribe if you enjoyed this story.